Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more of the Great War. This time we're on week 41, and maybe not a episode that will be as gruesome. We have the sinking of the Lusitania and the Gorlice-Tarnów offensive. I totally probably butchered that. I don't know. I don't speak Polish. Yeah. Before we dive in, though, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you join the Discord. Now let's just go ahead and dive right in. I wonder if we're going to be talking about more about, I feel like we got to be talking more about Gallipoli. I feel like they're going to get a little mention here in this week.
When I was a little kid, I'd heard of two ships, two ocean liners that had met with catastrophe. Now, one of them was the Titanic, who sank in 1912. But as for the other one, 100 years ago today, on May 7th, 1915, the passenger...
Hold up. I'm recording this on May 8th. Damn. Ah, so close.
ship Lusitania was torpedoed and sunk by a German U-boat, sending 1,198 men, women, and children to their deaths.
It's crazy. Yeah, those would be probably the first two ships that have met catastrophe that would immediately click on in my head. Lusitania and the Titanic. Titanic obviously spring into mind first out of all, and then probably would have to think a bit and be like, oh, yeah, Lusitania. Heard of that one. It's just not as forefront in my mind, at least. Don't know why I'm saying. I feel like I needed to say.
I'm Indy Nidell. This is The Great War. The big news last week was the landings at Gallipoli, which quickly descended into a slaughter on all sides. Turkish, Arab, Australian, British, French, and New Zealander. Tens of thousands of men were successfully landed, but the Ottomans remained in firm control of the straits. Further north, the Austro-Hungarian army was preparing for a new offensive with German guidance and support. The Germans had been thwarted in the west, and the Armenians in Van were still under siege. But there was a lot going on this week, too. And for a change of pace, let's look at the USA to start the week.
Oh.
On May the 1st,
I don't think we've ever done that in the series so far.
New York newspapers published an ad sent them by the German embassy in Washington that read, quote, "Travelers intending to embark on the Atlantic voyage are reminded that a state of war exists between Germany and Great Britain. The zone of war includes the waters adjacent to the British Isles, and that ships flying the British flag are liable to destruction in those waters, and that travelers sailing do so at their own risk." This warning...
That's never mentioned when talking about World War I and the sinking of the Lusitania. Kind of like also how when it comes to the nuclear bombs, no one talks about that the pamphlets that were dropped saying, yo, you're about to get your shit rocked. As tragic as the atomic bombs are, and of course this is unrestricted submarine warfare, it's total war, they're still saying, hey, you risking your own life by staying here or going on this boat. And of course, obviously, the circumstances of Japan is a lot different than an American deciding to go on a fucking boat, right? Because really, the Japanese, some of them, even if they had wanted to flee the cities that got bombed, they probably may not have been able to. Because of the government or whatever was happening. Whereas obviously the Americans have a 100% choice of like, yo, oh, nah, the Germans totally won't sink my boat. Yeah. There's obviously greater context to all that needs to be addressed, but it's funny the things that kind of get left out when we're talking about war, because it's mentioning the dropping of the pamphlets when it comes to before America would. I think Britain did this too. I'm not sure. Dropping of pamphlets before bombing a place, which I think was done by the Allies. I don't know if Russia did it, and I don't think Germany did it during World War II. It was dropping of the pamphlets to inform people, hey, we're about to bomb. Might want to leave. save your life kind of thing, then that grays war, that's like, oh, that maybe that bombing wasn't as bad. It's so weird to say that, 'cause it's like, bombing's bad, killing people bad. It is war, so it's to be expected. Civilians should be off limits in war, but the scope of war has expanded so much that it's kind of impossible to no longer include civilians. Ugh. What is this tangent I'm going on right now? I don't even know. But yeah, especially when it comes to discussing World War I, talking about and mentioning the fact that it was very public information that the Germans said, hey, if you're an American and you are getting on a boat, we are at war with Britain. And if that boat you get on flies the British flag, it could be destroyed. It could be targeted by our weapons of war. That grays the waters and does not necessarily bode well for propaganda when you want to say, no, the Germans just did unrestricted submarine warfare. And then that information kind of helps solidify, knowing this context that the Germans put out that information, it helps understand that, hey, that's why America didn't join immediately after the Lusitania, right? After this thing, because Americans knew the risks going into the Americans that went on Lusitania knew the risks. Risks were public information. As far as I can tell based on the information I've been given so far, that information was public. So it's like, you're not really justified in declaring war on Germany for those reasons.
Warning appeared next to an ad for the British Cunard Line's ship, the Lusitania, which set sail that day.
Really? Not only was the information public, but that letter in the newspaper was directly next to an advertisement for the Lusitania. What?
The Lusitania was the fastest passenger ship in service across the Atlantic, a real luxury liner, much like the Titanic, and also much like the Titanic, did not have enough lifeboats in case of disaster. Actually, the Lusitania had 4 fewer than the Titanic. Thing is, this was a common practice, for it was expected that if you sank, it would be in the shipping lanes where you could get help. So the Lusitania set sail for Europe. On the night of May 6th and the morning of May 7th, ship's captain William Turner received 6 warnings from the British Admiralty about U-boat activity in the area that had sunk 2 British merchant ships without warning. Turner was advised to travel at full speed and make a zigzag course. Now, I've talked a bit about this before, but I'll say it again. A submarine had to surface to fire its torpedoes, and its surface speed was no match for a dreadnought or an ocean liner like Lusitania. So traveling at top speed in a zigzag course pretty much made it impossible for these ships to be sunk by a sub. Well, Turner didn't heed the advice.
Are there just idiots in this world? It is World War I. There are just fucking idiots everywhere. Oh my fucking god.
Even dropped his speed and was traveling on a straight path.
What the fuck? You are told to increase speed and instead you drop it? That captain deserved to die.
Now, sub U-20, the one that sunk the merchant ships a day earlier, spotted the cruiser Juno around noon on the 7th. But Juno was zigzagging at top speed. So U-20 gave up the chase, and about 90 minutes later, sighted the Lusitania off the southwest coast of Ireland. A single torpedo was fired, and the great liner sank in 18 minutes. Of roughly 2,000 passengers, 1,198 drowned. Of them, 128 or 124 or 114 were Americans, depending which source you believe. The sinking shocked America, but President Wilson refused to abandon neutrality.
Fuck you, Wilson.
The Germans officially apologized, though many German papers wrote proudly of the sinking of enemies who bore responsibility for their own risk. Captain Turner.
They did bear the responsibility of their own risk, as it was in the newspaper. It was information that you knew. The advertisement for the Lusitania, right next to the German saying, hey, You board a ship with the British flag, you will probably get shot.
Turner, by the way, survived after being washed off the bridge. Former American President Theodore Roosevelt wrote a book arguing for rapid American rearmament and a huge naval construction program, and warned that what befell Antwerp and Brussels will surely someday befall New York, San Francisco, and may happen to many an inland city also. The USA did not prepare for war. Later in the year,
Petty, getting a little crazy there in your old age. I love you, but tone down that that desire for war.
Germany would officially place passenger liners off limits for U-boats. But for right now, American public opinion was inflamed, and many Americans who had pushed for neutrality were now changing their minds. But while foreign opinion wasn't going so well for the Germans this week, the actual fighting certainly was. In the West, at the ongoing Second Battle of Ypres, the Germans had driven back the British early in the week with repeated poison gas attacks, and on May 5th, recaptured Hill 60, which they had lost 2 weeks ago. But the big German victories this week were happening way over on the Eastern Front. On May the 1st, the combined Austro-German offensive began under German General August von Mackensen. The initial assault was preceded by a bombardment from 610 big guns, the largest scale attack so far in the East, and it included gas shells. In 4 hours, 700,000 shells were fired.
Damn.
The offensive was an immediate success. In the first day, the Russians were driven from Gorlice. 5 days later, driven out of Tarnów. The Russians
Gorlice-Tarnów
had made advances for 8 months. All of those advances were erased in under a week as the Carpathian passes, one by one, fell to the attackers. 30,000 Russian prisoners of war were taken this week. See, Mackensen had been very clever. The attacks launched in the north and south in April had been diversions, while his forces had gathered near Krakow. The Russians had also ignored intelligence reports of the German buildup, too busy hatching their own plans to break through the Carpathians. So Mackensen had managed to assemble an attack with a force of 300,000 men and 1,700 big guns. In Berlin, the thinking was now that this push was just a prelude to total victory over the Russians. And there was a petition to the German Chancellor Bethmann Hollweg from the 6 largest German economic and industrial groups with demands for once the war was won. These included in the West, Belgian economic and military dependence on Germany, the French coastline as far south as the River Somme, the coal-producing region of northern France, and in the east, part of Russia's Baltic provinces and a huge chunk of land to the south of them, so that the addition of manufacturing resources in the west would be balanced in the east. The area demanded contained a population of 11 million people. But no one was going to agree to that, so victory would have to come on the field. And one field where no one was yet claiming victory was at Gallipoli. On the 1st, the Turks attacked the Allied positions. On both the 2nd and the 4th, the British attacked and failed at Gabatepe. And on May 6th, the Second Battle of Krithia began. That village and the nearby hill Achibaba were necessary to capture in order to advance up the peninsula. But much like the landings last week, it was a bloodbath. Of the 25,000 or so Allied troops attacking, roughly a third became casualties. And though small gains were made, the objectives remained out of reach. However, losses like that could not realistically continue, or the Allies would soon run out of men to hold their own ground. But the battle plan was a joke. The attackers didn't actually know where the Ottomans were fortified, having not done reconnaissance. So the preliminary artillery bombardment was just a waste of shells.
You fucking
British commanders.
You are planning a massive military invasion, and you don't even do reconnaissance. What?
Aylmer Hunter Weston cemented his reputation for incompetence at this battle. Indeed, he is known today as one of the worst generals of the war overall. He would soon be promoted to lieutenant general. One Allied advance that was making headway this week was in German Southwest Africa, as South African forces occupied Ochimbigwe and Karibib. South African Prime Minister and General Louis Botha complained publicly about the Germans poisoning the local wells. The German commander admitted the fact, but said that the wells were marked poisoned, so it was, okay. And that was the week. The Germans spectacularly successful in the east, performing well in the west and losing ground in Africa. And another bloodbath at the Dardanelles, and thousands of people drowning in the sea. But I'm not talking about the Lusitania, for that wasn't the only sinking this week. On May the 1st, a British submarine penetrated the Dardanelles and sank a Turkish troop transport with 6,000 troops aboard. 6,000. 3 times the amount of people on the Lusitania. But you don't hear about that sinking. They weren't civilians. They were soldiers. They were cannon fodder. They were insignificant. But they were men, and one of the most famous poems of the war was written this week, in 1915, by John McCrae, a Canadian doctor in the Canadian Medical Corps, which he wrote after seeing the wreckage of Ypres, and it was for all of those insignificant soldiers who died. In Flanders fields, the poppies grow.
Oh, I've heard this
between
one.
the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw, the torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. If you'd like to see more about what was happening in Flanders fields, click here to see the beginning of the...
And that was the sinking of the Lusitania. The Gorlice-Tarnów offensive. Great War Week 41. Not as good as the previous week in my opinion, because kind of less stuff happening, but also the initial landings of Gallipoli is a big thing to talk about, right? That was very very good material, I guess, for lack of better words to use. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.